we had a visiting night with all the high school friends and family and things. And I played for him the first time a song that I knew he loved, which was a Pink Floyd song called Wish You Were Here. And I played the riff, down, 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 down. And he actually came out of the coma mouthing the words to Wish You Were Here. And everybody in the room was like, crying and very heavy and emotional and like really feeling the music in a very, very visceral way.
What if the most powerful therapy in your community didn't come from a pill, a doctor, or a data platform, but from a song?
Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of innovation, leadership, and care. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, founder of CCR Growth, the only full-service demand generation agency that is exclusive to the senior living industry. And through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of senior care, exploring the innovations, the strategies, and leadership insights that are shaping the future of the industry. So whether you're a provider, a caregiver, or industry leader, this show is here to help you make informed decisions and create meaningful impact. All right, today's guest is Andy Tubman, a board-certified music therapist and the co-founder and chief of therapeutics at Singfit, a company that's transforming music into medicine for older adults. Drawing on decades of clinical experience and neuroscience research, Andy has built programs that make evidence-based music therapy accessible to senior living communities across the country. His work bridges technology, empathy, and human connection, helping more than 1,000 communities use singing to improve mood, engagement, and quality of life for residents, while empowering staff with a ready-to-deliver tool that turns passive listening into active healing. So, Andy, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jerry. It's a pleasure to be here and talking to you.
Absolutely. I've been a lifelong musician. I started playing piano when I was, I think, 5, and it's been something near and dear to my heart my entire life. So this particular endeavor is very interesting for me. I'm very curious about the moment that music became medicine for you. Can you tell me about that? Can you take me back to that experience and what you saw firsthand that kind of shifted your mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually, it was the first day of college or the night before the first day of college. And I went into school in the morning and a friend ran up to me and said, "Hey, Sean got in a really bad accident last night." And my best friend from high school basically went through a windshield. People were partying and they had body bags ready for him. He was in surgery for a couple days. It was just a very tragic situation and traumatizing for everybody involved. And what eventually happened is he went into ICU. He was in a coma. And then after going through pneumonia and all these different things, he did make it through the night, the first night. So he survived, if you will, but was, had all kinds of challenges and brain damage and visual challenges. Like his face went through the windshield. He was in a coma and yet put in a room that was a stable room. And all through the 3 months of coma, I had learned that just as like a kid, right, as like a baseball player, someone who wants to be a rock star, dude, I was trying to learn how to play guitar like everybody in college. And so I had started to sneak in the ICU because I heard that people in comas could actually hear. And so I'd go in and play badly for Sean. The nurses hated me. I don't know if that was because I played badly, but eventually I started to get a little better, learn more songs. And once he was in a stable room, still in a coma, we had a visiting night with all the high school friends and family and things. And I played for him the first time a song that I knew he loved, which was a Pink Floyd song called Wish You Were Here. And I played the riff, down, 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 down. And he actually came out of the coma mouthing the words to Wish You Were Here. And everybody in the room was like, crying and very heavy and emotional and like really feeling the music in a very, very visceral way. And the nurse at Einstein, came up to me and was like, "Hey, you should talk to our music therapist." And I'm like, "Music therapy?" And so I literally the next month happened to be in Philadelphia, and one of the best, Temple University is one of the best music therapy programs in the world. And so I auditioned and got in and never looked back. It's kind of took me on a path.
Wow. That's amazing. That's so awesome. I've been in marketing for almost 3 decades, and through my agency, I've helped some of the largest senior living providers attract qualified leads and fill rooms faster while lowering their acquisition costs. But one thing kept bothering me. While working with larger communities, I kept meeting smaller operators, 10 to 50 bed communities that were struggling to compete with the big box providers because they don't have the same budget, staffing, or support behind them. And as a small business owner myself, I get that. You're wearing 5 different hats, you're trying to fill rooms while still giving great care, and that's exactly why we built Growthly. Growthly takes everything we've learned from helping large operators fill their buildings and makes it accessible to smaller communities without retainers, without long-term contracts or inflated costs. It's a performance-based partnership, and you only pay when we deliver move-ins. We help you stand out online, stop depending on referral agencies, bring in qualified families, and fill your community faster. Growthly is built for your small community and designed for big results. Learn more at growthlyseniorliving.com. There was a study, I guess neuroscience have shown that singing activates more brain regions than any other single activity. It's like stimulating memory, motor, and emotional centers like all at once. I thought that was pretty awesome to learn.
It's amazing. Language, timing, motor planning. Like when you're singing, right? You're working lips, respiration. So it is a global engagement of the brain, neurologically speaking. And so when someone has a lesion or shrinkage in a specific part, the idea is that so many other parts are working together to sing, right? That you're either bypassing or really stimulating the part that's been damaged. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting tool in general. And you're singing Blueberry Hill. It's not exactly a challenging task. It is challenging neurologically inside, but a beautiful, joyful thing on the outside.
Were you interested in being a therapist at all before that experience?
Oh, no, I had no idea what that even, not at all. I was interested in playing baseball. Yeah, to be honest.
So how did you transition then into the senior living space with music therapy?
Well, as a music therapist clinically, I definitely had some experience in that world in terms of working in senior care. And then I had a job for a number of years working in geriatric inpatient psych. So I saw the tip of the iceberg, but the most challenging scenarios that senior care is dealing with. And then someone gets hospitalized and then they would come see me as a music therapist. And so I was able to develop some good experience in terms of how do you utilize music in those settings and with, very acute patients and conditions to really create some positive outcomes without medications or in a collaboration with medications. And then over the years, through private practice and different kinds of work that have done, we started Singfit and just realized how much of a void there actually is in terms of functional solutions for the senior population, especially with any kind of cognitive, neurological challenges, including stroke and things. Just there's just not much there. Right. And so there was a massive void to fill, and it seemed like a beautiful opportunity.
What's happening neurologically when an older adult sings compared to when they just listen to music?
So it's nuanced, but there is very interesting research that looks at the two things. And to me, like just from a 1,000-foot level, I would say that when you're singing, it is obviously quantifiable, right? Because you can actually know the person's singing now, right? If you're listening, you don't know the level of engagement, especially if the person is having challenges expressing themselves. And so with that idea, because singing is pretty much accessible to everybody, if you are getting somebody singing on a regular basis, I like to think of it as like taking singing and creating a yoga practice, meaning the regular routine out of the singing.
Mhm.
If you're getting a senior doing that, you're really getting this global exercise neurologically, and the respiration and the learning process and new songs or old songs and verses you didn't know. So this is really a beautiful brain gym, if you will, from a music therapy research point of view.
And then for someone who might be experiencing or living with dementia or even depression, how is that more impactful for them than others?
Well, sometimes it's not more like people have different preferences and individuals have different kinds of go-to activities. But in general, when you're singing, you really have this, it says the science, a regulation of different and stimulation of different kinds of neurochemicals, right? Because you're again working the areas of the brain, and those areas of the brain are all part of creating and processing hormones and neurochemistry, right? So you have this, says the science, the regulation of cortisol when you're singing. And
Mhm.
cortisol is one of our stress hormones. You also have a positive effect on the dopamine and the serotonins, right? So these are some of our uplifting hormones or neurochemicals. So when you're singing on a regular basis, what's hopefully happening is you're literally increasing your levels, similar to like a vitamin, hopefully that's being effective for you. You're increasing your levels over time. Another interesting piece of research is the research out of Irvine that has to do with your hemoglobin A in the bloodstream. What they've shown here is when you're singing, it's increasing about 200 to 300% on a regular. And so what that means is that the immunoglobulin immunoglobulin A, I believe that's right. And I apologize if my pronunciation is bad. But what this is an indicator of is immunity fortitude. And so as you're doing this on a regular basis, in theory, your immune system is even becoming stronger. Again, kind of back to the concept of the gym. If you're going in and working out on a regular basis, right, that means that your muscles are getting stronger over time. It helps your posture. All these different things are moving forward. It's a very holistic approach. Similar with the singing is a holistic approach that doesn't
Mhm.
have that many downsides to it, really.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. That's really amazing how much that impacts the physiological systems in the body.
Yeah.
Tell me about what's Singfit. Well, first, I know this started with your father, so I would love for you to share that story with our audience, and then just tell us a little bit more about how Singfit works.
Yeah, of course. So my dad actually was an opera singer, when he was young, and you would call him now a serial entrepreneur, but what he actually was back in the day, we would call them crazy inventors. And if you combine the two things, he was driving and he's like, I need to learn the libretto in my car, just like we learn, like when we forget our words on the opera stage. At that time, there was a person behind the shell that would help, called the opera prompt, and they would spit out the words that the singers would forget. They would help them with the libretto. And so my dad took that idea and said, when I'm in the car, I want the opera prompter in my car so I can learn these songs as I go. And so fast forward 30 years fast forward 30 years, I'm finishing up music therapy school. And I called my sister who I run Singfit with. And I'm like, guess what? That crazy idea dad had? It's actually a music therapy, speech therapy, evidence-based practice of word cueing. And here's what that looks like. And so we were off and running in the idea of scaling things with technology with that idea.
That's so cool. So, what makes Singfit different than, say, some other music program that a community might integrate into its activity program?
Well, I don't want to be too biased, but karaoke is one of the only things that people use that is getting people singing. I don't mean any offense to the karaoke people, but there is zero design or intent except for selling more karaoke. And so when it comes to Singfit, there's a word cue, so no one has to read, right? So people with cognitive challenges, right? People with hearing challenges, people that just need are inhibited and going inward. All of these things mean the musical experience is very far away from them. But when they get that simple cue, hopefully that means that the musical experience is spontaneous and engaged and their voice is rediscovered, so to speak. And so to me, just the design that we are looking to bring out the voices of as many people as possible and the different elements of design, both in group and in one-to-one or our app technology, all of that is designed to bring out someone's voice on a regular basis, kind of like I was saying in the yoga practice.
Mhm.
So the difference is, one is the word cue, right? So that people don't need to read and make a more complex scenario because they have to read and integrate language into time, and all this neurological challenges kind of goes away. You hear it and you repeat it, which is a very, normal kind of anthropological process for humans. And then there's the word cue, and then there's all this design around the word cue to increase engagement, to make people feel comfortable, to create an intention that uses active music, not passive listening, as a way to engage, create joy, support clinical goals, support a whole bunch of processes. So yeah, I would say it's quite different than most programs.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. And then because you guys aren't necessarily in every community
Yeah.
running or facilitating this, I mean, how do you turn the care staff into facilitators of the program?
Yeah. So what we've figured out, which was not a quick figure out, we've worked for, we have a great investor, and we first created the app, the word queuing system, and then we went to him and said, we got an app, but no one's gonna really understand it. And he's like, do what you need to do. So we took a couple years of research and development and literally going into communities and adult days and figuring out that if we come up with a really concise playlist with different elements of what a music therapist might do, right? Read trivia, create movements, have a really good storyline, and this whole basic process in terms of a group, we could actually figure out how to train activities folks and people who are, therapists, and to actually follow protocols pretty simply. And that's how we initially scaled it into our group process. And then we went even further with our one-to-one app and our self-administering app, that all of those engagement ideas and that music therapy expertise is baked into the technology that guide the person using the app. Yeah.
I think one of the challenges, not just in the music space, but just in general, when it comes to any kind of program that's supposed to add therapeutic value, is who has to administer it for that to be the case. And it sounds like you guys have made it possible for any staff member, not just a therapist, to be able to deliver that therapeutic value. Would that be an accurate statement?
That is true. I would say, like, our for the most part, and this might be expanding very shortly, but our catalog is primarily English speaking songs, and these songs are chosen very specifically for how they, the space and the queuing process. And in the communities, as long as the facilitator could be a CNA, could be a speech therapist, but as long as they can read and speak English clearly, then they can facilitate the group program. And the nice thing about this, and part of the thing that really helps both a one-to-one caregiver or a group facilitator in a community, is that they don't need to know the songs and they don't need to know to be able to sing, right? Because in the app, there's a track that has the spoken lyrics that cues the words, like my dad's idea from the opera stage, and a guide singer. So if you have a 23-year-old activities person that doesn't know who Frank Sinatra is, it doesn't matter. if it's she just turns up or he turns up, the lyric coach, everybody knows the words, they can fake it. And as long as they have good energy, they engage with that person, get a little bit of training, and they're off to the races and really getting that high level of therapeutic music engagement.
Oh, that's really
That's
cool.
the idea.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. I think too, a big concern or focus, I guess, nowadays for operators is differentiation, right? And I think it's not coming through amenities anymore. It's going to come through the experience. And there's a
Yes.
Harvard health report that came out, I think in like 23, that said that adults that engaged in group music programs reported a 32% higher life satisfaction score. And so I think like, today's families, they're not just buying rooms, they're buying trust, they're buying based on emotion and then like connection. So when a community can demonstrate those tangible emotional wellness outcomes, it's going to build a solid reputation, trust and retention for those residents. How do you think senior living operators can use music therapy as part of their brand story?
So I think you bring up a really good point that the idea of just engaging someone to pass time is a very antiquated approach these days.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so to be able to speak to a program that covers both the engagement side, because you're only seeing a doctor a couple minutes a day or a week, right? You're only eating for a couple hours a day. There's a whole rest of the day that things need to get filled depending on functionality. And so to be able to have the engagement side and supported by all the research around the wellness from a musical point of view, I think is a deep differentiator. Not to mention, like, even in our group product, we encourage the salespeople to get trained, right? It's only an hour and a half, and to get trained to understand how to talk about what Singfit brings to the table. And then they tour people during Singfit groups, right? Because it's a much more compelling idea than to say, oh, I want my loved one to be a part of that and to feel to observe a very humanizing and joyful experience versus people sitting in a wheelchair, slumped over, waiting for a nurse to do something, blah, 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 blah. So it's in terms of like your observation around like hospitality versus old school kind of approach in senior care. This is something, the engagement level of this, I think fits right into the new kind of hospitality kind of approach to things.
It's interesting how that shifted too. I mean, it used to be all about retirement and leisure and relaxation. Now it's shifted. It's not just living well, it's like living better, right? What would compel someone to want to live in a community aside from health concerns or advanced levels of care that are needed? If somebody is going to move in at an earlier age, you're going to have to show them that life is going to be better in your community than before. So I think having programs like this is just one way to do that.
Exactly. I mean, to say like, why don't you join our wine cheese singing club on Friday nights? Why don't you, check out some of this research and get up and have a routine of breath work and 3 songs every morning as a preventative, process, right? There's so many ways to kind of apply this to different levels of functionality. Most of the time, the musical process, if it's introduced the right way and in a sensitive way, people listen to music like 4 to 6 hours a day, I think, on average, is what the big stat is. It's like, just take it a little bit further, and instead of having it be the background, it can be a part of your marketing and of a health wellness process.
And from the operational perspective, I mean, what have you seen? What outcomes do operators and payers care most about when adopting programs like SingFit?
It ranges quite a bit. Some want like specific pilots that we set up specific um, kind of criteria on what success is for them. That might be levels of engagement during the groups. We'll put together different kinds of assessment tools, mood assessment tools. Did they sing, interact, blah, 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 right? Depending. Everything to like, the staff loved it and the staff was singing too, and it was easy to use, right? And
Mhm.
so the whole spectrum. Or do we see over a trial of 5 buildings out of, somebody owns 100 buildings. We try this in 5 buildings, and over 3 months of using Singfit, let's say on an MCI or dementia unit, did that actually move the ball a bit in terms of move-ins, right? And so there's a variety of ROI meets kind of clinical criteria and wellness criteria that folks look at. But we often work with them to figure out what is really important to them and try to prove that out from the technology that we have, the abilities of those technologies to give certain data on the back end, as well as different kinds of marketing tools. So we individualize, that for the community depending on their needs, typically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think more operators are leaning heavy into the data side of things and wanting to quantify everything that they're investing in. So, I mean, is that something that you see more emphasis or focus on in the future? Is getting more clinical insights with data backing it, or how do you balance that technology with empathy?
No, no,
It's kind of tough.
no, it's a great question. And we have an iSNP provider, and that's a company that is basically an insurance company that goes into skilled nursings, right?
Hmm.
And skilled nursings don't always have the resources actually that senior care does, but they are using SingFit, the group Prime, in over 300 skilled nursings. And they came back to us. The reason why they rolled out to all of those communities is that after about 100 communities, they did a study in 3 different areas of the US, about 4 communities in each of those areas, and came back with data that we had nothing to do with, that after singing twice a week, reduction of hospitalizations, reduction of behavioral exacerbations, and a reduction of falls, right? So the thing is when they saw that, they were like, whoa, let's see what that does to our membership. And they said that it even increased the membership, their numbers, not mine, 40%, because it's a different model than senior care, right? But because you can't advertise to patients within a skilled, but because of that SingFit group and this joyful process going on, onlookers and family, they're like, oh, what's that? I want to be a part of that program. And so the marketing goes up, and so their membership goes up. That's a stat that's unique to them. But what's not unique to them is a reduction in hospitalizations and what kind of trauma that might save, and money. And the one of the things that's really interesting there that I wish I had 5 years and $5 million to take a look at is the reduction of falls, because I'm always skeptical on how that happens. And what our discussion was around with the provider was that when you reduce the behavioral exacerbations, you reduce the PRN or as needed medications, and people are more steady on their feet. So you reduce the falls simply by changing, a bit of the behavior. So the data is of all importance at this point, and we're very aware of that. We get a bunch of data on both our group and our one-to-one, and are able to create enterprise reports or specific reports around each community.
Hmm.
So, and then, like I said, if they're really interested in different points of data, then we need to work that out on a one-to-one basis. I'm with you. It's all data.
Yeah. Have you seen any communities open this up to like the outside community as an event? Curious
Interesting.
what that experience is like.
Well, there are some communities that use this as once in a while as a marketing tool, maybe on a Sunday, like where they're
Hmm.
trying to do like open house kind of things. Definitely. There's a lot of stories around, families being invited into the group sessions, and, you know, where the families are very nervous, like someone just went from AL to memory care. Right. And it's like, well, what's happening there? And it's locked and these kinds of things. And joining into SyncFit, people see that there's this cooperative, warm, energized, joyful thing going on, right? And someone who's not speaking is singing, right? Kind of thing. And so there's these moments maybe not the same moments that I had with my friend coming out of the coma, but there are these very powerful moments that people can experience because as a music therapist, I know 100% that when music is applied in a sensitive way with good intention, you are going to get very powerful results.
Absolutely. Is there something coming down the pipeline when it comes to music and medicine that you see as like the next evolution, or
There
maybe something you hope is the next evolution?
Yeah, man. I think that there's, our group process is a bit more hands-on, right? Because we're creating playlists that have a script and movements and it's a bit more of, materials and things. But to me, the next thing, both in active music making as well as in passive listening, is the idea of baking in different kinds of biometrics readings, different kinds of user data, different kinds of assessments, from voice assessments to phone behavior assessments, right? Taking all this data, wrapping it up, and really trying to figure out what are the clinical goals here, and then how do you use the best practice of music to support those clinical goals. I would say that that could be a very exciting and beautiful use of music therapy expertise and music as a supportive tool in general. As always, I think that the programming of this and where this goes is dependent on the ethics of the people programming it. And so, you know, collecting biometric data and all these kinds of things on people is a very sensitive issue these days. But in the best case scenario, you would be able to assess depression from a voice snippet of 30 seconds spoken or sung and be able to set somebody up on a regular, yoga routine using singing and really modifying and collecting that data over time and really seeing the trends and proving out how effective music is for real.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think one interesting area too, I know this industry is struggling already with staff retention, and I know that that's only going to get worse
Yeah.
and more complex over time as the number of older adults continues to increase. There was a study from 2022 that said that groups that were singing in the workplace showed a 50% rise in like perceived social bonding and collaboration. So I'm sure that has to improve retention. And so I'm curious about using the analogy of like music as a leadership lesson, right? So, music involves so many different things. It involves connection, it involves, you have to understand rhythm, you have to be able to listen. There has to be harmony among the team and like the culture of the team. What do you think senior living leaders can learn just from what the example that music sets about connection and culture?
So I think that there's two things you're bringing up. One is when you're singing together or making music together actively, you are rocking that oxytocin, right? That's a neurological benefit that happens, right? You're singing, the oxytocin's getting released, and that means connection, rapport, connection to a peer, connection to staff, staff to resident, staff to staff. So that chemistry is flowing when you're actively making music. So that's one huge positive, right? And we see it. We have videos where the staff are just like, woo, right? It's like full on party sometimes, right?
Yeah,
And I'm just like,
right.
just make sure that person's sitting down. Please don't let them. But at the same time, there are ways. I'd like to think that in our trainings, there is what I would consider sensitivity training through the lens of a musical process. And it's exactly what you just described, which is very insightful, I think, on your end, is that when you are doing different kinds of musical processes together, you are learning how, if I come in and someone's playing a very soft, sweet cymbal that's and somebody else comes in and it's just like right? Different time. Like, but the thing is as a music therapist, We are trained literally to understand what that means in the real world and how to interpret that nonverbal language. And so, from a leadership point of view, to do retreats with a music therapist, right? Or someone that specializes in this, to say that what happened, first of all, musically, what happened, and then second, right? So what happened? There was a mood and an energy in the room. You could even think about it as being a bit depressed or flat affect. Then comes in the same time, and this banging's happening, or this heavy drum groove, depending on how you're interpreting it again. And what does that mean if this is a person over on this side and they're interpreting how they're being or not being heard? What does that mean in terms of rapport between the two folks? What does that mean in terms of who has to have the most, who has to adapt the most, and why do they, and why should they? And if they should, what does that mean? And so there's all this nonverbal information that you can't lie in, right? You can't be diplomatic. And so it's a very interesting way to approach team building and how to think about really creating a positive. I guess your initial question that I took a rampage on was, how to really build staff and rapport, right? Yeah. Sorry, it was a little bit of a left.
No, I love your response. That's a great response, and it got me thinking too. I mean, I was a nationally touring musician for over a decade, and it is like an unspoken language. I think when people connect on in a musical space, I've never felt closer to other human beings than I did to my bandmates when we were on stage together. And that's almost like, if for lack of a better word, that's a high that I've been chasing my entire life, is to find that experience in other scenarios. And I have yet to do it outside of music. So there is something powerful and magical when people get together in a space like
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, when your bandmate hears you going, and the guitar is like, wow, 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 and you feel heard and complements your language and your expression. I'm even getting chills just talking about it. Like the level of validation, right? And security and comfort and openness that brings into a band or a team, if it's applied in the right way, is a very, very valuable human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Andy, thank you so much for such a great interview, and for sharing your stories about how you came into this space, and more about Singfit. Where can our audience go to learn more about Singfit or connect with you directly?
Pretty simple. It's just www.singfit.com, and happy to we have info at Singfit for some general information. If people are interested in having me, like, from anything from like talk to them around how they integrate a musical program, right? Because it's actually not so simple, right? Because there's ROI to consider. There's distorted speakers in the entree hall, right, that are distorting, but there's still sound going on, so they think that they're baking music into. There's like this whole like thing of like, how are you thinking about music? How are you threading music through the day? If folks are interested in that, or things like you brought up around building teams around music, Andy at Singfit is also an easy way to get a hold of me if you want to do a deeper dive into that. But for product stuff, the info at Singfit is probably the easiest way to go. But and I really do appreciate, Jerry, you kind of putting this on your platform and having this really nice exposure and this time with you.
My pleasure. This is an awesome product, awesome experience, I think, for communities to integrate. So I'm really excited to see what comes down the pipeline for SingFit. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to thank you, Andy Tubman, for sharing your story and clinical wisdom on how music can reconnect the mind, the body, and the heart. From lyric prompting and staff led sessions to measurable outcomes in resident engagement and staff morale, SingFit demonstrates that care innovation doesn't have to mean more technology, it can mean more humanity. So, if you want to connect with Andy or learn more about SingFit, all the links are in the show notes. As always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the evolving world of senior care, covering everything from care models and leadership strategies to family engagement, technology, and the future of aging. And remember that From Leads to Leases isn't just an audio experience, we're also a video podcast, so you can subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify channels to watch the full episodes. I'm Jerry Vinci, founder of CCR Growth. Thank you for joining us on From Leads to Leases, and please like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. Until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.